My topic today is the art of acceptance. And I wanted to share why I chose the word art. I was reflecting during that meditation about the art that stirs our soul and moves us emotionally. And I was really sitting with the amazing art that has been a part of planet Earth for thousands of years, that have been created from a very deep place of emotion and intuition. Right. And so, what I really want to talk about today as we explore the topic of acceptance is the levels of acceptance and the art of moving into that deep place of emotion and intuition as we then look at how we can accept in a really profoundly different way. And so I loved the reading. I want to thank Nancy for that incredible reading. And there was so much richness. And I love that Amy said, thank you for the reminder, because that's really what we're all doing here. Any words that I say, the music that we hear, the presence that we experience really isn't a teaching as much as it is a reminder that our soul knows that it knows that it knows. And when we hear or we listen to that truth, whether it's words or notes or beautiful artwork, it reminds us of our true nature. So I wanted to start with looking at kind of the top layer of acceptance. And if you are anything like me, you might have been someone that has been labeled a control freak, or someone that has tried to control the world. I'm just going to say, for me, I have definitely worn that label before. And I'm going to explain why I'm starting with that. And it's very, very simple, because the first level or level of awareness as it relates to acceptance for me in my journey was an acceptance of the world as it is rather than I thought it should be. And I love the story that was told about the bride and the rain in the reading, because I remember at one point listening. I lived in San Francisco for 29 years and listening to conversations about people who were complaining about the fog. And I was thinking, what could be more futile than living in San Francisco and complaining about the fog? It reminds me of Byron Katie when she wrote her book, Loving What Is. She had a very similar experience living in Barstow, which apparently is one of the windiest places on earth, right? And she would hear people talking about how much they hated the wind. And it occurred to her that nothing could be more insane than wanting the wind to not be windy or the fog to not be foggy. I've moved to LA now, and if I were to move to LA and start complaining about the traffic, what would that create, right? There's a light and a shadow to every single situation. And I think the top layer of acceptance is recognizing that the world is as it is. And my trying to change or manipulate the world has caused frustration and separation, but only 100% of the time. Now, I would imagine if you're listening to that, maybe you've had that experience, and understanding that sounds profoundly simple, doesn't it? Like, oh, I can't change the world. Well, we're going to come back to that. On this level of awareness, we're going to say we can't change the world. The world is what it is, and I can be in acceptance of that. Now, that's pretty simple, right? So I could ask myself, then why did it take me about 40 years to figure that one out? Well, it took me 40 years to get that because it took me 40 years to understand that, right? Wanting my mom to be different, wanting my school to be different, wanting my job to be different, wanting my boss to be more understanding, wanting to find the perfect partner. You see, that first layer or that first level of acceptance for me is really an outer reality, right? And it's looking at in new thought what we call relative reality. And that's what we see, what we taste. It's what we use the five senses to experience. And in that reality, everything is always changing. Right? Everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Everything is dynamic and constantly moving and shifting. And so when I'm living in that reality and that reality only, in other words, when I believe that relative reality is ultimate reality or the truth, that's when I suffer. Because then I start saying, why is this happening to me? Why does she keep acting that way? Or why do I keep repeating the same pattern over and over again? And why can't I break it? Do you hear the word why a lot? It has been said that why is not a spiritual question. And when I first heard that, I was like, well, why not? Or why is that true? And then I started exploring that, because what I have learned to do is when I hear a concept, rather than immediately rejecting it, I want to be curious about it. So I'm curious why someone would say why is not a spiritual question. And through the course of my early development, my early spiritual development, I came to understand that I was asking why because I wanted to get to the root of it so that I could fix it. Because you see, I was still living at a level of consciousness that believed there was something fundamentally wrong with certain situations, and I needed to change them in order to be happy. We're going to explore, though, a new layer of acceptance. And that layer is actually accepting that the world is perfect as it is. Now, that's a big stretch for a lot of us because we see all these things that we want to change. So let me explain what I mean by perfect. Because we've been programmed, I've been programmed, most of us have been programmed to look at the world through good and bad and right and wrong. So if I say the world is perfect as it is, there might be a reactive impulse within you that would say, well, how can that be true? There's all these things that are happening that are horrible, or these things that are happening that just can't be viewed as okay or perfect. So let me take a little deeper dive. Life will give you whatever experience is needed for the evolution of your consciousness. When I understood that at a very deep level, I was able to see the perfection in the world. Because if something's getting activated or touched within me, in other words, if I notice a reactive impulse, I notice a place where I have an opportunity for a deeper level of awareness or spiritual growth. So another way to say it is, Dr. Gabor Maté says, unresolved trauma is not a memory, it's a reaction. And the reason that I want to say that right now and why I'm talking about trauma is, as many of you know, the fundamental knowing that is true for me in my world and in my spiritual teachings and in my spiritual practice is, as Amy said, that there's a place within us that is unharmed and unharmable. And that we did come into this world as that, and then we got programmed to believe all sorts of lies about who and what we are through what we could call a traumatic experience. And these wounds then are trapped somewhere in the unconscious or the subconscious, and someone says or does something that activates that wound. And early in our development, we say how horrible that person is that they just said that. This is horrible. And if I could just remove toxic relationships from my life, I could be okay. Or if I could just get that person out of the political office, I would be okay. And we're looking at a different way of being, and that is simply this. Not if I notice a wound gets touched, but when I notice a wound gets touched, it's how I relate to that that creates what I call reality. In other words, what if the world was actually profoundly neutral? But because I have a particular point of view about the world, that is what I experience. So the deeper or the deepest level of awareness around the topic of acceptance for me is an acceptance that I am whole and perfect, an acceptance that spiritually there is nothing or no one that can ever do or say anything that can harm my essential true nature. And when I understand that that's the only true acceptance, accepting my own wholeness and perfection, spiritually speaking, and also accepting because of that, that as I tap into that, I become a being with infinite potentiality rather than limitation. Because you see, the only past that really exists is the past that lives within our mind. And when I say that, some people say, oh, are you trying to minimize what happened in the past? Actually, not at all. What we're doing is we're playing with this idea that in relative reality, and that includes the past, that it really is a point of view. It's not reality. And that is a point of absolute power, because as I understand that I am the projector and that The world is the screen that I'm projecting onto. It is a complete shift in our awareness. And as we raise our awareness to understand that I have stories about the past, but I am not the stories of my past. And an interesting side note is we often hear people say, well, I can't change the past. And that is true on one level of reality. But what I've come to understand is it's not what happened, it's my point of view about what happened that creates what I call reality. So, in that way, as I grow and evolve, I can look at a situation from my past and I can begin to shift my point of view about it. And I'm not talking about just my thoughts. We're talking about really understanding at a very deep level that the core ideas, the core false beliefs that we've created about ourselves and the world are what we project onto the world. In other words, 10 people can have the exact same experience and have 10 different results from that experience because of the way they perceive the experience. And if I move out of good, bad, right, wrong, and start to become curious, I can then move into the point of power, which is what gets created when I believe that story. And what I want to do is take a little further, because it's easy for the mind to want to go into the debate of it. But it did happen. It is true. That's what happened. Are you trying to say that what happened in my past didn't happen? Not at all. What I'm saying is that it's my point of view about what happened that creates the projector. And so it's wonderful to know, and sometimes painful to understand, that I'm projecting onto a blank canvas, but only 100% of the time. So we can use the art metaphor again. What would happen if I were to really understand that life can be a blank canvas and I can then paint whatever portrait or landscape I want to paint? The issue for most of us, and certainly true for me for many, many years, is I had the old painting that I was bringing into current experience, and I was trying to paint on top of it, paint a new narrative, create a new story. But I just kept noticing that paint kept seeping through. How come I keep experiencing the same thing over and over and over again? I've been reflecting the last 24 hours on a divine truth that Pema Chodron brought us, and that is life will continue to present a situation until it has taught us what we need to learn. And I had an opportunity in the last 24 hours for a person to bring up something from the past, and I noticed that I had a slight reactive impulse. Now, I could have gone into judgment of the reactive impulse, but what I've come to understand is having a new relationship with ego is a very, very different framework than trying to be rid of ego. Having a different relationship with ego is like, oh, look at that. That just got touched. And I had a bit of a reactive impulse. I have compassion, I have understanding, and I have openness and love for that part of me that still had that wound. And then I thought of Pema saying, it will continue to present itself until it teaches me what I need to learn. So what is it for me in the last 24 hours that I've had the opportunity to learn? I've had the opportunity to learn that I always have a choice. And I have a choice regarding where I put my attention. We spend so much time trying to change the world or trying to change the circumstances of our life that we miss a fundamental and powerful yet really simple truth. And that is, I can choose to put my awareness somewhere else. In other words, as it was beautifully sung, I am spirit. I have an ego, but I'm not an ego. And that reminded me of a reading from Eckhart Tolle that I want to read at this moment, because it just speaks to this new awareness of how we can move into the ultimate acceptance, and the ultimate surrender is to know that I am source energy. That's the ultimate surrender. So this is what Eckhart Tolle has to say about it. One day, I will be free of the ego. I will awaken. Who is talking? The ego. To become free of the ego is not really a big job, but a very small one. All you need to do is be aware of your thoughts and emotions as they happen. This is not really a doing, but an alert seeing. In that sense, it is true that there is nothing you can do to become free of the ego. When that shift happens, which is the shift from thinking to awareness and intelligence far greater than the ego's cleverness begins to operate in your life. So when I read that today, I realized that that is the experience that I've been having over the last 24 hours. And to even pull back a little further, that's the experience that I've been having in this incarnation on planet Earth. You know, we often hear we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And I love the way our friend Michael Beckwith speaks about it. He says we are spiritual beings having a human incarnation. We are incarnated here as spirit. And for whatever reason, we come into this world that has the sense of, or the appearance of, division of good and bad and right and wrong, of us and them, of our tribe, of our people, of you're wrong and I'm right. We're swimming in that. But when I understand very deeply that all of that is not who and what I am, it's not who and what we are. Who and what we are divine beings that have come to planet Earth to share that, to shine that light, to be that love frequency in the midst of absolutely anything happening. And when I understand that I have an ego, but I'm not an ego, I have a past, but I'm not my past, I have a thought, but I'm not my thought, I have an opinion, but I'm not my opinion. When I understand that for me, I can have compassion in that for you. And what then changes is everything. Because I can move into the ultimate acceptance, and that is an acceptance filled with love and compassion for all the people in my life that might have not yet understood that they're not their thoughts, that they're not their past. So it took me some time to come to that understanding. And as Eckhart Tolle said, this is not about a thought, it's about an awareness. So let's talk for a moment about the difference between thought and awareness. We in New Thought have been focusing on thought. It's right there in the title. I have a new thought, and new thoughts are really incredibly important. We do change the narrative. We do work on the story. We do notice our thoughts and change our thoughts. We do spend time playing with the idea that if we change our thinking, we can change our life. And then there's this moment that can happen for us where we can recognize that there's a greater reality. And that reality is pure awareness. And I can begin to shift my focus from my point of view to my state of being, from the programs of my life to ultimate reality, to an understanding that regardless of what's happening in the outer world, it can be an opportunity for growth and awakening. And for me, and this is for me, when the ego, my ego, gets touched and I notice the reactive impulse, because that's what the ego does. It protects, it defends, it looks at the otherness, it looks at the right or wrong. It's not bad. It's not something that we need to push away or diminish. It's something that we can embrace as a part of us, but not who and what we are. And when I really know that I know that I know that spiritual essence is who I am, I can bring in the shadow, the stories, the perspectives, my past traumas, all the issues that I've had in my life with this place of understanding and compassion. So in closing, and I know it's not really closing because we love to do Q&A, and I hope we have time for that today. And it's not really questions and answers because we don't have the answers. We just have more questions, but we play in the field of infinite possibilities together because we really are one mind, one heart, one beingness. So in closing, what I want to invite is a very simple question. Where is your focus today? Where are you coming from today? Who are you being today? Are you in a belief that you are your past, you are your stories, you are your opinions? Or can you tap into a greater level of awareness, the art of acceptance, accepting this greater reality, accepting that life is a hologram and I'm projecting onto this incredible canvas and I can paint whatever life I want on that canvas. The only thing that needs to happen in order for us to do that is to unpaint everything that's ever been painted from the time we were born until this moment. So if I want to experience reality, if I want to know the truth, I begin by examining what is untrue. And what is untrue is that you are limited, you are broken, there's something wrong with you. You've had this difficult life. That is the untruth. And the truth is you are an infinite, powerful being. And in this moment, you do have the ability to tap into this greater reality, to recognize that you are literally source energy, and source energy has no judgment. There is no judgment in energy. Energy is. So if I am source energy and you are source energy, imagine what the infinite possibilities of what we can co-create together. We can unplug from the earth drama and plug into something so much more powerful, and then watch the world change as if something in the world changed. What really happened is, oh my gosh, I am not that anymore. I am that I am. Peace and blessings. I love you all, and I look forward to our conversation. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, TJ. So much good stuff there. I know everybody feels the same. What did you? I'm always taking notes here. You said your point of view is not your reality, and what that made me think of is growing up in school and hearing different stories of history, right? And then I remember picking up the book, People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn, in I think my freshman year in college. And I was like, this has a completely different point of view from some of the things that I was taught. And it was one of my first real big awareness moments of like, wow, there's different points of view, and that doesn't mean reality. So thank you for saying that and bringing that up. I think that's an important piece, and well, so much that you said is so important. I love what you just said. Unplug from the earth drama. I love that.
Yeah, there's plenty of it we can plug into, right?
There's plenty of it. Oh my gosh, so much drama. I love the reminder that we will continue to get presented with situations, until it teaches us what we need to know. And I really appreciate the way you spoke about having a new relationship with ego is different than trying to get rid of the ego. And I think that was a real big turning piece for me in my life anyway, was really realizing we're not trying to get rid of ego and looking at ego as like the bad enemy or something. This is just part of our human system, and to really create this new relationship, like you said, with it. So everybody, I know you have questions, comments, drop them in here into the feed, and we will get to them and have a conversation here.
Yeah, I'm reminded as you were saying that, Amy, I was loosely part of a spiritual community in the early 90s that was really big on language and that our language creates reality, and absolutely true. And they took it to this place of, if they had anything that they ever said that was perceived to be negative, someone else in the community would say, oh, cancel, cancel. And then the person would say, cancel, cancel. That's not true. Right. And so it was sort of this like thing where it was, well, I mean, it really wasn't that subtle, but it was really like, oh, I shouldn't have that thought. That thought is bad. Right. And so I think we were just redressing an old paradigm of like, there's something wrong with me. Right. There's something, right. I shouldn't be doing that. And then now it's like, oh, isn't it interesting that I said that? Wow. Where did that point of view get created? And then I can look at that and then say, oh, wow, this knowing, this language, this energy field is going to create more of what I truly desire. And then it becomes really simple and fun.
Right. Yeah. And I love the word that you use often, and I do as well, as staying curious. Really, just shifting to curiosity is like the magic tool. Okay, let's check in here, everybody. Hello, hello. Let me scroll back so I don't miss anything. John says, nothing needs to be fixed. Everything is unfolding perfectly. So when you stand in your now, accepting that all is well, then from that vibration, you become surrounded by more and more evidence that all is well.
That's right. That's
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
And then we can actually, and what I love about that is then we can make an impact on the planet, right? We can be a profound change agent on the planet. And it seems paradoxical, right? Because when I unplug from needing to change the world and plug in, as he said so beautifully, plug into my essential beingness and then start to radiate that, that actually has a ripple effect or an instant shifting effect on planet. It's like, oh, isn't that interesting? When I surrendered my old way of being against and started tapping into my true nature, then it's like, oh my gosh, look at all these profound, because I think that's how change has really happened on the planet. The true change.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful. What you said in your talk is, what if the world is profoundly neutral?
Yes.
And life is a blank canvas? And I really love that reminder, because I started to do that with situations like, would someone else react this, would someone else have this response? If the answer is no, it's like, this is my perception, this is my experience, so now let's look at it, see what's going on, right? Because it really is neutral until we create something out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think about different cultures, and something that we call horrific, another culture doesn't call horrific, but they call plenty of what we do. And when I say we, I'm thinking of the United States. Like, what we do is horrific, right? So what's the reality here? Well, it's all about the perspective.
Exactly. Isn't that true? I watched a show one time with my children about different foods, people eating different, and the response to, I think, something we were eating, I can't remember, maybe bananas in cereal or something different to another culture. It's like, that sounds gross, something that we think is good. Yeah, it's good to keep that perspective, just to keep our minds awake. Pat says, yes, ego is needed. It's our personality and what we use to interact in the world. It is our gift we are to give to the world, in the world, but not of it. Thank you.
Yes, and that's thank you, Pat, for bringing that in, because for me that's the fundament. That's really important, because if I didn't have an ego, we would be pure essence, which may be true that that's what we move to next. I don't know. We can actually be that pure essence in the world, but our ego is a delivery system of that spirit, right? And I talk about this a lot, right? We all have our own unique gifts and talents that come from ego. When ego is delivering spirit, when we're using that in a way to be a servant instead of a master, I'm sorry to use those terms. I know but if I think about it as the ego's in charge, and then spirit is not in charge, look what gets created. When I shift that, and again, I don't like that language I used. God, that's an old program. It's so interesting.
No, that's okay. It's like a hierarchy is what.
Yeah. So it's like having that then become something that's useful for our spiritual. It's a spiritual delivery system. Let's put it that way.
I like that. Thank you. Let me scroll. Mirabai says, yes, awareness. That is the first step of remembering who and what we really are. Thank you, TJ. Yes. Beautiful. And you had some beautiful reminders for us today, Mirabai and Steve. Thank you. Beautiful music and songs. David Miller says, accept this moment fully.
Yes.
Yay. Beverly says, thank you, TJ, for the reminder that our life is a blank canvas, also about our past and memories.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Beverly. Randy says, life is a blank screen informed by a profound, unfathomable love. I am a divine blank screen. I am no thing. I am love. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say Randy? That was Ron.
Thank you, Ron.
Sorry. Hi, Asha. I see Asha was here, and Christy. Don says, life is made great for me by being willing to be dazzled, and I am daily.
Yes, I love that. Yes. It's interesting when I train mayors and clinicians. Sometimes a therapist or a counselor or a clinician will say, well, I don't think our clients are ready for that yet. And I'll say, my mantra when I'm going to work with clients or facilitating a group is, I am prepared to be infinitely surprised by the ability of the people in the room. Right. And that's something that I tap into because, what I really understand is I'm projecting onto them. Right. Oh, they're not ready for that. Well, might that be true that maybe it's I'm not ready for that, but I don't use that in the room when I'm training a clinician or a counselor. I say, what would it be like to be surprised by your client's abilities today? And I have them reach out to me and say, oh my gosh, like I remember just tears coming down my face because someone said, oh my gosh, after our training yesterday, I went and facilitated a group. Our clients are so much smarter than I ever realized, right? And so there was a point of view about clients that was getting created when there were really infinite possibilities in the room. And we can become curious, as Amy and I love to say, rather than deciding what they are and are not capable of.
Right. That's right. What's the saying? I might mess it up, but it's about, speak to, children the way, that you want them to perceive themselves because they believe you, they take on the words, that you tell them, what they're capable of. And, it's true. I remember math was never my favorite subject, but I remember hearing at some point, like, oh, well, you're just not really good at math or strong with math, and so I really took that on and embodied that and, went to college for English, but in that process, even in college, I had to take math and I realized, you know what, I'm not so bad at math after all, but there was something that had been imprinted and we're just taking the moment sometimes to check in with what is that story? What is that belief I'm holding on to? What is that program that doesn't create the neutrality, the neutral space? Okay, let's check back in. I know everybody always has a lot to say when TJ shares with us. Hi, everybody. I see you here. Christy says, so wonderful listening, accepting all your beautiful gifts. Mm-hmm. Yes. Paris says, I really love what was just said about our personality being the expression of the divine. Yes. That's so true. We really are special and to be accepted and celebrated. We spend so much time contending with ourself and living in a narrative that there is something wrong or broken that needs to be fixed. Right. We are exactly where we are supposed to be right now, as is, and it's all perfect.
Yeah, and I love that you're saying that. And I was reflecting as I'm hearing you read that, Amy, that some of the greatest gifts for me have been the most painful experiences because I got to see that I'm not that, right? I'm not that story. I'm not that belief. I'm not that experience. But there was something about having that, what we could at one point of conscious awareness could call a negative experience. I don't believe that there's any such thing as that. Now, there are some that are not very pleasant. Let me be clear, because we're not doing a bypass. Like, oh, that was really fun when someone I really love died. We're not saying that, but there's an opportunity here. Like, let me be really present. And that's what Eckhart Tolle said in the reading. Let me be really present with my thoughts and emotions and then become curious about them. And then, what Paris, I think, is really saying here is like, yeah, we all have our unique gifts and our way to bring it. It's an expression of spirit. It's, for some it's song, for some it's speaking, for some it's writing. We all have our gifts and they're all equally valuable.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And they can have, could have taken on labels about those gifts over, time. And I've shared this story before about when I was a little girl that I was called bossy a few times and, would want to control the games and how everything was done. And taking that into a different energy really became a gift of mine, for leadership and just the way I operate. Out of control could be a little crazy, but yeah. So thank you, Paris. That's really, really important for us to embrace. There was something else that I wrote down that you said that was so beautiful. Oh, life will give you whatever you need for the evolution of your consciousness.
Yeah.
And yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting because even saying it will give you, when we talk about manifesting. I think at one level of awareness, we think we've created something. But what we've really done is cultivated an awareness of something which already existed, right? So when I say life will give you whatever experience, I don't really think that it's giving it to me, but because something pushed up against a program or a place of tightness or a place of opinionating, then I have the opportunity to grow my consciousness because, oh, there's something dense right there, right? Not in a place of right or wrong, but, oh, look, there's that little impulse right there. Oh, I love that part of me, right? I remember when a certain political figure was running for office, my friend would say, I love my inner, and then name the person, right? Because she was acknowledging that I'm not going to project onto this person, right? I'm going to recognize that that's a part of me as well. And if I have compassion for that, there's a possibility for an evolution in consciousness. And I'm not going to go further with that. We could do a whole hour on that.
We could, and it's beautiful. And thank you for that reminder, because I think it's important to say, because sometimes people will make that statement. What is it like? I don't know, like the universe is doing this. What is it like? Like testing me, or what was it?
Conspiring. The universe is conspiring.
Yeah, conspiring. Exactly. Right. Yeah. So I think it's important to make that clarifying statement, because
I was in a workshop with back when I was in Unity, Reverend Sonia Milton, and we did an entire 90 minutes, and all she did is write the question on the whiteboard: is the universe conspiring? Okay, let's go 90 minutes on that. We were in small groups. It was amazing, right? Like, and watching myself and other people pushing up against their belief system, right? Yes, of course it's conspiring, because I used to think it was against me, right? And that's what I noticed is for me and my evolution, it was an important shift from the world is against me to the world is for me. That was an important part of my evolution. And then I moved into like, oh, what if it's more neutral than I ever imagined? And everything is possible here, but my consciousness only allows me to see what I can see. So it's not about the universe conspiring. It's about me expanding my awareness and looking at all the infinite possibilities. And then I get to choose. And then it's like, oh, wow, everything just changed.
Yeah, and beautiful, and what freedom in that too. I noticed that a lot of times that comes from a program, maybe of a kind of a religious idea of something watching you, or you're getting condemned for this or that, and so it's just about stepping into that awareness and realizing what is playing, and freeing. It's so freeing to come into that space. Okay, let me check back here. Christy, when you figured out that you made a wrong choice or not the best choice, do you think the universe will provide more opportunities?
So one of my teachers early on said, it's popular to say, I don't have any regrets. And she said, if I meet a person who doesn't have regrets, I'm really concerned. Right. And now let me be clear. I understand what people are saying, right? I don't want to stay in the energy of I did something wrong, because I can get stuck in that. But if I say everything I ever did was perfectly in alignment, that's not true for me. Because what happened for me is I forgot who and what I was, and I started to harm myself and others. And it was that simple, right? I didn't remember my true nature. I believed that I was broken or damaged, and I acted broken and damaged in the world, right? So if through conscious evolution, I can move into a space of where I'm, even saying non-judgment is a judgment, but moving into a space of open curiosity, I can say, oh my gosh, I don't want to do that again, right? I don't want to be part of harming other people based on a belief that I'm broken and me projecting it outward and all those things. So I think, what was the last line of the question, Amy? Because now I don't remember.
Yeah. Do you think the universe will provide more opportunities?
If it's true that it's neutral, then it's always an opportunity, right? So if I'm in alignment, if I'm vibrating from the frequency of the truth of who I am, an infinite being, and I'm experiencing that in the world, then the universe looks like it's conspiring, because we do seem to attract the frequency that we're holding. I think we're really open to it more. So if I have a place where like a button gets pushed, an old wound gets touched, and I notice the reactive impulse, I could say, look, the universe just gave me another opportunity for my healing, which is true. And the deeper reality is I only had the experience because of the unhealed wound, right? So, someone can say or do something and I can have nothing on it, right? And it could be perceived as something negative, but if it doesn't touch a button, I'm like, oh, interesting point of view. But if they say something that touches an unhealed wound, then I'm like, oh, and then I notice, then I have to go through the whole experience of having compassion for the part that seems wounded and move into spirit and move into acceptance. But I think what a lot of us, what I have done and where I hear a lot of us getting stuck is we're focusing on the deliverer instead of what's really happening, right? And if you know the book The Presence Process, or if you want a mind-blowing book, Busting Loose from the Money Game, it's not at all what it sounds like, but it can be what it sounds like. But it's really about, there's a process in it where you thank the sender, right? So if someone says something and it touched a wound, it starts by letting me really feel it rather than reacting. Let me really feel it. Let me be curious about it. I have a friend who says when someone comes to me with a judgment, I pause and I start with, I wonder in what ways this is true, right? Instead of defending, and then feel it, and then tap into our true nature, and then thank the sender, because the sender just allowed us to grow, right? So if someone has a judgment of me and something gets touched, which is what happened in the last 24 hours, I got to see, oh, there's that place that still gets hooked. And then I say, oh gosh, thank you. I don't even know who the person is, by the way. Thank you, whoever you are, because you helped touch this wound and it really allowed me to heal.
Yeah, beautiful. That's so interesting. I had something interesting like that in the last 48 hours.
Oh, we'll talk offline.
Yeah. But so powerful to be in that space where we can thank the sender.
Yeah.
And that really, when I'm thinking about provide opportunities, what I begin to think about is our frequency and our vibration, right? And so then we're attracting. And I was having a conversation with somebody recently about experiencing letting go of like a home. So if in this moment of saying goodbye and releasing, you can't be like excited, but we can go into gratitude, like, thank you for this time here. Thank you for the memory, go into that thanking, the similar to thanking the sender, right? And then that can move us into a different vibration. It might not be yet, excitement or however we might describe that. However, it's not in, it can bring us out of the deep well of sadness. And not that I'm saying that's bad to be there, because we have to feel that too. We can't just bypass. I'm not talking about bypass.
Yeah, that's an interesting balance, right? Because I think sometimes people, when they hear me or us or anyone say the importance is to lean in and feel the emotion, the fear is we're going to get stuck there. And the truth is, for me, and this is only true for me, that when I feel it, I move through it organically, right? If I really allow myself to, whatever grief looks like. I mean, I remember and I've shared this before, but I had these two amazing Chihuahuas. They lived with me for 15 years, the loves of my life. They both died within a few months of each other. And everyone kept saying, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for your loss. And that's not where I was at. I had felt it. Right. I remember just sobbing when the first one died and just sobbing when the second one died. And the second one, we actually had a ceremony. We had to, put him down, and we did this beautiful thing. And Will and I did this ceremony in our home with him, and I grieved. So the point that I'm in a roundabout way coming to is, by the time once I allowed myself to grieve, I had moved into gratitude for the 15 years. And so then people kept wanting me to go back to the sadness, and I wasn't there anymore. And so I didn't really know what to say to them. I just said, thank you. But then in my consciousness, I said, and I'm in the gratitude frequency. And it would have been okay if I felt sad again. But for me, it didn't really happen. I'd have these thoughts of them, and sometimes a little moment of sadness would come up. And rather than rejecting it, I would just say, oh, let me feel that. And then I would move into appreciation. I've had so many moments where sadness it morphs into gratitude. And it's just this beautiful experience.
Yes, I've had the same. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think it's an important piece to let people know, because sometimes that might get lost in the message, like, don't feel sad or don't experience your experience. But no, that's not it at all.
Right.
And I think it's a really important part of our evolution.
Yeah.
So thank you. I know that is an important piece to me too, because sometimes when we share in groups or we share amongst one another, and someone is having this experience today, I often won't bring it up tomorrow or next week, because I like to allow the space for people to be somebody different the next day, be in a different space, and not have to go back to that story or that.
I am not experiencing what I did 20 minutes ago.
Exactly. Yes. I want to shift and change. Okay. That was Paris. Then Christy. Dave says spiritual law just is like physical laws. Gravity is not acting for me or against me. It just is.
Great analogy. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, and I love that, because gravity is neutral, but what happens if I try to fight against it? Right. I'm not going to make it go away, at least not in this current reality on Earth. Although, that could be debated. Well, we have planes now, right? We have rockets. So it is an interesting little nuance.
Kathleen asks, can you talk more about willingness?
Amy, I think I didn't hear you.
I'm sorry. Kathleen is asking, can you talk more about willingness? Can you say more about willingness?
Yeah, let's see. What can I say about willingness? It's interesting, the word, right? Because it's will. The word will is in there, right? And so I think sometimes when we think of willingness traditionally, it's like, I need to bring my will into it. And so what's occurring for me in this moment goes back to, because I think in one level of consciousness, we talk about my will or God's will or Spirit's will. And if it's true that, like I said, energy doesn't contain within it any judgment, just like gravity doesn't contain any judgment, it's just a law, right? If it's true that I am an essential being, there's no separation from what we'd call my will or God's will. That's an old paradigm. And I can tap into different parts or different seeming parts. In other words, I can be willing or bringing my will from ego. Again, we're not saying it's bad. We're going to say, what does it create when I'm coming from ego? I'm reminded of when I got the calling to go into ministry, and I'm not going to tell the whole story because that would be an hour. But there was a place when I realized it was time for me to move away from unity and into starting my own New Thought Center. And I struggled because my ego, once I got that vision, my ego or my will immediately was like, oh, and it needs to look like this, and this is where we need to be. And I was pushing. So for me, that's not willingness anymore. Now it's like, oh, let me tap into the divine will, that truth, which is always wanting to expand and, evolve and open, unfold. And when I'm tapped into that, then all of a sudden, what is willingness really isn't about pushing at all. It's about being in the flow and coming from spirit. So I suppose willingness would be always, to the best of my ability, moment to moment, reminding myself that divine will or that essential will is so much more powerful than any kind of force. I think of, David Hawkins' book, Power versus Force. I think that's what we're talking about. True will is a great thing. As we brought into Pat brought that in earlier, our personality is useful when I have tapped into a deeper awareness, and then I'm using my personality to bring it. But again, once personality is in charge, right, I'm up against things.
I know a little bit about that.
I hope we all do.
A little bit about that. So beautiful. And when you were talking about this and willingness coming up, my hit was your hit earlier was the Serenity Prayer.
Yes, so, which I didn't bring in today.
Well, we could close with it.
Yeah, it's true.
Feel up to it. Okay, let me scroll back here. Looks like We talked about willingness. Christy says, thank you so much. Don says, what if the universe is neutral? Good takeaway.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Dave says, thank you for sharing your experience. We have two 13-year-old chihuahuas we love dearly. Yeah. Our fur babies. Mirabai says, wow, that really helps me moving from sadness to gratitude and appreciation. Thank you. Thank you for being here, Mirabai. Luinda says, you've given me so much to think about, TJ. I so appreciate your message today.
Oh, thank you, Luinda.
Paris says, to me, willingness is more about readiness for alignment with the divine.
Oh, beautiful. I love that. Readiness.
Yeah.
And then the question is, because I like to ask myself the question, what would it take for me to be ready, right? And so that might be a mindfulness practice, spending time in the silence. It might be questioning my programs, right? So how am I ready to express divine will? How am I ready to reconnect? And we never really disconnected, but raise my awareness to recognize that I've always been whole and perfect, right? So what would it take for me to be ready? I love that, Paris. Thank you.
Yeah, that's beautiful. What would it take for me to be ready?
Yeah. What does ready look like? What does ready feel like?
Yeah. Yeah. Feeling into that. As you talk about it, willingness sounds like stepping stone into surrender. Dave offers that.
Yeah. And surrender to me, I would say the ultimate surrender is to know that I'm an infinite being.